So for the history of the Uwipi, the Uwipi itself is an ancient Lakota healing ceremony. It is used to help the sick, help those find lost items, or help people get closure when their loved ones have died. In ancient times, the Uwipi was never mentioned by name, as it was supposed to be seen as a secret ritual that was meant to be hidden from outsiders. And then the Uwipi is also one of the oldest traditions in Native American history.
A Uwipi ceremony holds a lot of symbolism and involves a lot of symbolic figures that we will go through, as well as talk about some important words that are used often during a Uwipi ceremony. So Uwipi has many meanings, but in the case of the ceremony, it is a ceremony used for physical or spiritual healing, and it can be initiated by a sponsor, who is someone who has a problem or needs help with something, or it can be initiated by a Uwipi man, who is a qualified individual, typically a medicine man, who conducts the ceremony. And if he initiates the ceremony, that means that he discovered something. Maybe he discovered someone who has passed and he needs to deliver that news to their family. He might conduct a ceremony to help them with their grief, or maybe he discovered that something was stolen. He again might initiate a ceremony to help heal and move on from that event. Uwipi could also mean sacred, powerful, tiny little rocks that are involved within the ceremony. And rocks hold a lot of significance because they are ageless, eternal, and are sacred to the land. They also represent connection to our ancestors since they have been on the same land as our ancestors. Part of the word Uwipi, Yui, also means to bind or to tie up, which is another process within the ceremony that takes place. And a Uwipi ceremony has quite a few things that are necessary for the ceremony to take place. Not only do you need the sponsor and the Uwipi man, but you also need a medicine man and holy things, which include colored flags, which are colored black, red, yellow, sometimes green and blue, and represent various things. Flag staffs, which hold the flags up, tobacco knots, the altar, wagmua, rattles, and the sacred pipe. All these things are placed accordingly within the ceremony space. As you can see pictured on the right, that's a typical setup for the ceremony, and it might vary depending on how the Uwipi man prefers to conduct them and prefers to set them up. He has some liberty there.
So for the ceremony itself, it starts with the tying up of the sponsor person by ropes, the person who's looking for help, or rope or string. This is used to symbolize themselves, giving themselves up to the medicine man and the spirits to help them with their issue. And so for a successful ceremony, you need 7 things. First one is sagebrush, which is used during all ceremonies to cover the floor. And it's used as like a first aid plant to represent the powers of nature. And they're also placed behind your ears so the spirits can come and communicate with them. There's colored flags, black for the west, night, darkness, and contemplation, yellow for the south, sun and death, and red for the north and blood. And then some ceremonies also have green flags, which represent the earth, and others have blue flags, which represent the sky and the clouds. The next thing you need is flag staffs. The 4 staffs holding up the colored flags. And then there's a 5th one placed between the red and the black with an eagle feather and the tail of a Tahatopta Sapa, which is a sacred, powerful deer in Native American history. And then the staves themselves are made out of Kanu Kichima branches. The next thing that you need are tobacco knots, which are just bundles of tobacco made by a woman before the ceremony begins. Hundreds of bundles are made and placed on the perimeter of the ceremony location, creating a sacred space within the rectangle. There's an altar which is placed behind the fifth staff and created from smooth dirt, which is where you sacrifice the gifts and the ceremony takes place. There are wagumahas, which are rattles made from buffalo or deer hides, gorges, and rocks, and they're used usually to cure the sick during a ceremony, but in general, they're used for communicating with the greater powers. And the last thing you need is the sacred pipe. The sacred pipe originated from the Lakota creation story, where the white buffalo calf woman gave them a sacred pipe along with a rock as a form of honor and represents health and connection to the ancestors. And all of those things are considered holy things for the ceremony and are completely necessary if they want the ceremony to go the correct way. The next thing they do is gather stones and put them in a teepee, as the rocks contain the spirits themselves, and these are called the wasikun rocks. You have to hire a medicine man to conduct the ceremony, and essentially what they will do is they will get wrapped, they will perform all the rituals, and they will get wrapped up like a mummy, and lights will be shine down on them, and then that will allow them to go to another dimension. And then once they go to that dimension, it is said they're able to find what the person was looking for or what they would need to heal themselves. Sometimes it could be as simple as spending time with a certain animal or finding like an animal feather or something like that. But it kind of varies, what each person needs to do depending on what they're looking for. And then the last thing, which is pretty interesting, is that this ceremony is the more expensive than a traditional Native American ceremony because it's the only one where you, as a sponsor, so the person who is receiving the help, you're required to supply food for everyone at the ceremony. So you essentially have to purchase enough food for everybody who's going to be there and the medicine man. So that can really be expensive for people, which can deter people from doing this ceremony. But it's also what makes this ceremony such an exclusive and powerful ceremony in Native American religion.